Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. I'm Greg. It's still a heat wave outside, still being roasted out of my normal studio space, but so we're shooting another one down here in the parlor. Last one seemed to work out fairly well, so shouldn't be any problem. Anyway, today I want to take a look at a slightly different watch. I know that I was supposed to be evaluating the Citizen ProMaster Diver that I unboxed and talked a little bit about its idiosyncrasies a couple of weeks ago, and I am doing that. But for the last couple of weeks, it's been extremely hot, sweaty. I've had numerous large contracts going on. I've been going down to the machine shop and doing a lot of work around milling machines and stuff for a project that we've got going on there. And so I have been wearing a different watch, more or less for the last couple of weeks, and I've been wearing it off and on for about the last 2 years. And of course, you've all read the title down below. It's the Invicta Pro Diver. And I know, Invicta is controversial, to say the least, as a brand. And while there are certainly a large number of people who really love Invicta, you might be one of them, they're not really for me, for the most part. They tend to be too big, in my opinion, and unnecessarily cluttered, in my opinion, and frankly, to my eye, a bit garish. But Invicta does have the capability of making a few nice watches. And even amongst people who talk trash about Invicta all the time, there's one watch that stands out and kind of gets a pass from most of the Invicta haters, and has gained a bit of grudging success. And of course, that is the 40mm Pro Diver. Anyway, I first became familiar with Invicta back in the early 2000s. The current incarnation of Invicta apparently became a thing, I think, in 1991. I never saw any watches from them until the early 2000s. And in 2001, my house was burglarized, and I lost my two very best watches off of the top of my dresser in one afternoon. One of them was a 10-karat gold Longines 5-star Admiral, which was a really beautiful and fantastic watch. And the other one was my Seiko 7000 series diver, which was the precursor to the current SKX series. And so I was left without a really good watch. I still had my Vostok Amphibian, my original scuba dude, but my other two decent watches were gone. And I think I might have had a few Casios or something knocking around at the time, but I needed a new decent dive watch. And that was just about the time that Invicta kind of came onto the scene in large numbers. And I became aware of the brand. I was vaguely aware that it was a reincarnation of an old Swiss brand, which kind of intrigued me, even though that turned out to be mostly bullshit. But, well, it's not really, but it also kind of really is. But they seem to be using decent Japanese movements, and there was a little bit of buzz on the discussion forums, which, the internet was around back then, believe it or not, 20 years ago. And the brand hadn't really developed its current reputation. So most people were taking a look at the watches and saying, yeah, they seem to be pretty decent quality construction. They're using good quality movements from Citizen at the time. And there were some stories of indices falling off the dials and stuff. There were a couple of teething problems, but a lot of people said they had very good experience with the brand. And I thought, well, they're pretty cheap, less than $100. I'll take a risk and buy one. And the first watch I bought was a Pro Diver. And that was an early model, obviously, 20 years ago. That one had a Citizen 8200 series movement in it. And I wore it a lot. I really beat the hell out of that watch. And it turned out to be perfectly water resistant. I think that was a 300-meter model, but it might have been 200 meters. I don't know. But it was totally water resistant. I beat the heck out of it. As you might expect, the Citizen 8200 movement worked just fine. And I had that watch for quite a few years. And then as I started to evolve as a watch enthusiast, and Invicta's reputation started to devolve into not something so good, I kind of grew away from the watch, and eventually I wasn't wearing it anymore, and I sold it. I didn't even want to put it on my eBay account, so I just gave it to my wife. She put it on her eBay account and sold it off, and I got not a bad price for it, and whoever got that is probably still wearing it today. It's probably still working. But I didn't really want to have anything to do with Invicta for quite some time. And then a few years ago, and I started seeing some people on social media, even people who hate Invicta, giving some grudging respect to the Pro Diver. And I thought, I remembered to myself, yeah, it was a pretty decent watch. And I wonder, are they still pretty decent? Have they evolved at all? Has the fit and finish maybe gotten a little bit better? It could be actually a really good watch. The last one I had was very decent, but maybe it could actually be a really good watch. And so I started looking around, and just about 2 years ago, there was a Father's Day sale on Amazon, and I bought this Pro Diver for $43. And I don't really see how you can beat that if you can find it on sale. The Seiko NH35A movement that's inside here, if you buy it at retail, sometimes sells for about $46. So I got the watch for $3 less than the movement on the inside of it, a retail. Now, of course, Invicta buys their NH35A movements much, much cheaper than that because they're buying them in enormous volume. But I've been pretty impressed with the watch. I haven't worn it a lot because I still have a little bit of that Invicta bias. I kind of don't want to be seen wearing an Invicta. It's all well and good to say, oh, you know, I just wear what I like and I don't care what anybody thinks about me. And largely that's true. But my own bias against Invicta sometimes prohibits me from looking down at my wrist and seeing that little winged cross and the Invicta logo. But other times I get a much more proletarian feel, and I say, let's put on the Invicta. And I always come away being pretty happy with it. So I've had this watch for about 2 years. It's a little banged up. It's a little scratched up. I mostly wear it when I'm doing stuff that I don't want to, go about beating up my nicer watches. But it's a really pretty decent watch, and I want to take a closer look at it on the tabletop. So let's go do that. All right, everyone, here is the Invicta Pro Diver, and I promise I'm not going to make this super long. I realize there's about 1,000 other Pro Diver videos on YouTube, so I don't have a lot to say that hasn't been said before. I just wanted to give you a closer look at my example. I did get the all blue model because, well, that was what was on sale for $43 at Father's Day 2 years ago. And I like it. I think it's the only watch I have that has a blue dial and a blue bezel ring. I don't believe my Citizen ProMaster has a blue bezel ring. No, that's black. So anyway, let's get the dimensions out of the way right away. The case diameter is just about 40 millimeters. The lug width is just about half that. And it sits about just about 15 millimeters, 14 millimeters off the wrist. So it's not terribly thick. I mean, it's sizable. It has some wrist presence, but it's not obtrusively tall, which is good because the crystal is mineral crystal, hardened mineral glass, and it does have a cyclops, which is also hardened mineral glass. That is going to get scratched up. If you use this as a tool watch, if you use this as a hard duty watch, I promise you at least your cyclops is going to get scratched up. Probably the crystal. Now, I've been wearing this watch pretty much, and you might be able to see the bracelet's gotten fairly scratched up. I don't take super good care of the watch. But so far, I've managed to avoid scratching the crystal or the Cyclops, but it's just a matter of time. And the truth is, the beauty of a $43 watch is when you do scratch it up, what have you lost? Not much. So dimensionally, it's pretty similar to a lot of other Rolex Submariner clones. It does feature an oyster-type bracelet, very reminiscent of Rolex. Solid links throughout, including the end links. It does have these folded sheet steel shrouds, which take up the excess space between the end link and the case. But the actual load-bearing links are all solid, including the end link, which is this center link right here. Now, I know somebody is going to chime in and try to explain to me that the end links are in fact folded, that the quote shrouds unquote that I talk about are in fact the end links. If that's your argument, I would suggest that you don't have a very clear concept of the definition of link, because these are not load-bearing structures. They don't link anything to anything else. And I would say if you can mount an argument that will convince me that these shrouds actually link something to something else, I will give you this watch for free. I will send it to you at my cost, but I don't really have any fear of that happening. The other end links are also solid. Now, the clasp is made up of folded sheet steel. So the structures that hold the pins here, the little loops that are formed to hold the pins, those can stretch. Those are definitely load-bearing. Well, actually, I'm not sure that one's really load-bearing because I guess it probably is. Anyway, and the clasp itself is folded sheet steel. The retainer is folded sheet steel. Nothing too surprising there. I've never had anything like this fail on me outright, so I'm not too worried about that. And again, remember, we're talking about a $43 watch. It does feature the Seiko NH35 movement, 24 jewels. It beats it's a standard or fairly standard beat rate of 21.6, as opposed to the 28.8 you would find in like an ETA 2824-2 or something like that. But it's quite a nice movement. It's definitely an upgrade over the 7S26 movement that you would find in, say, for instance, a Seiko SKX, which doesn't hack or hand wind. This is a hacking and hand winding movement. The 8200 series Miyota movement in the Citizen ProMaster Diver is hand winding, but it's not hacking. So the movement in this is actually an upgrade over the movement in this watch. So it's just a pretty nice watch. I don't know that I really have a lot else to say about it. Mine's been holding up fairly well. I think it's a pretty good looking watch. One thing that really bothers a lot of people is the fact that Invicta media blasts the Invicta logo on the side of their cases. And not a design element that I would have gone with if I were designing this watch, but it doesn't really bother me that much. You can see it when you're wearing it on your wrist, but it's not really a deal breaker for me, certainly. Anyway, I guess I don't really have much else to say about the watch. It's a good watch. You can find them really cheap if you wait for a sale. And, you know, even though Invicta is a very polarizing brand and there's a lot of people who don't like the brand and don't like a lot of the designs that Invicta sells, it's pretty hard to find any serious fault with the Invicta Pro Diver. To find a watch with 200 meters of water resistance, a screw-down crown, and a Seiko NH35 movement, which is a fairly premium movement inside it, is hard to beat at 43 bucks. Even if you pay full retail, which I think generally you'll pay about, I don't know, $75 or something for one of these. Essentially the same price that you would pay for a Vostok Amphibian, and I think in a lot of ways, this is arguably a better watch than the Vostok Amphibian. There are a lot of ways in which the Vostok Amphibian is superior, though. So anyway, I like it. I think if you're thinking about buying one, it's pretty hard to go wrong with it. So anyway, let's move back over to the bookshelves and wrap this up. So again, the Invicta Pro Diver, it's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people. I mean, Invicta sells these things in enormous numbers. I don't know what Invicta's status is right now in the hierarchy of watch brands, and I don't go in for that sort of exclusivity hierarchy. I'm talking about which corporations manufacture the most watches. But Invicta has gone from basically being an investment group startup in like 1991 or something to being one of the largest manufacturers of watches in the world. So it's not for everybody, but an awful lot of people have these. And to be honest with you, I can't think of a good reason not to buy one of these, particularly if you can find it on sale for $43 on Amazon. It's got an awful lot to say for itself. My particular example doesn't have a misaligned bezel. It doesn't have any misaligned indices, unlike a certain brand is famous for doing. It didn't come with any dust on the dial, unlike another watch we can talk about, or we will be talking about in the future. And while this watch cost about $300, somewhere between $250 and $300, and a Seiko SKX will cost you somewhere between $250 and $300. And this watch will cost you much less than $100, sometimes much, much less than $100. This is the superior movement. It's the cheaper watch. And I've been beating the heck out of it, and I haven't gotten any water inside of it. None of the indices have fallen off. The movement inside it hasn't imploded. I just don't know what else I could say about the watch. How else do you evaluate a watch for goodness? And, you know, aesthetically speaking, yeah, it's a knockoff of a Rolex, but so are pretty much all wristwatches being sold today to a greater or lesser degree. And a great many of them are downright clones like this one. So, I mean, there's hardly a knock against this watch. If you're a big fan of Squale or Steinhardt, how can you hate this watch for its looks? So, I don't know. I don't know what else I can say. If you find one cheap and you think you might like it, go ahead and buy it. What do you have to lose? If you buy it from Amazon and you really hate it, you can always send it back. So anyway, I know there have been tons and tons of videos made about this particular watch. This is nothing new. It's just my personal views. But I hope someone out there has enjoyed it. If you have, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes a long way to help keep me here on the tube. If you're already a subscriber, like, share, tell your friends. All those things are great. And if you're also a subscriber, go ahead and click the little bell icon down below. That will allow YouTube to send you notifications when I post new content to the channel. When I do that, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.